Hello and welcome to a Mr. Panza video lesson. Today we're focused on this question. How do we solve open number sentences? In previous lessons we talked specifically about the importance of number sentences, where they are, how we use them, and when we normally see them. Today we're going to see what we call open number sentences and how you can solve for those open equations. Let's take a look. A number sentence is open if it has a variable. A variable is a letter. For example, X. It can be A, it can be a blank space, it can be a question mark. The variable is something that hasn't yet to have been solved. A variable is a letter or a symbol that stands for a missing number. So in this example, 12 plus X equals 15. X is the variable. If a variable is in the answer, we solve it like we typically would any other equation. For example, here's my variable, but it's right there in the equation, so I just have to do, like I normally would, 7 times 3, 7, 14, 21. That means that X equals 21. Same thing with 8 times 8. Z is the variable, so when I multiply 8 times 8, I think about I ate till I fell on the floor. 8 times 8 is 64, because the variable is the answer. However, there are times when we have to solve sentences that are open with variables, and we have to use the inverse operation. Inverse, this word inverse, means the opposite operation. For example, if it's addition, you subtract. If it's subtraction, you add. Let's take a look at some of those examples. If an open sentence says to add, we always subtract to find the answer. Here's what I'm talking about. The open part of the equation is in an addition problem, 29 plus n, or 12 plus b. But then they give us the answer. In our first example, we're trying to solve for n. So in this case, we go back to our rule. We need to take the information we know and do the opposite, which in this case, instead of add, means take 51 and subtract it from 29 to get your answer. In order to subtract, you get the answer 22. If you're not sure that that's the correct answer, then I would plug the answer that you got, 22, as your variable and check it out. Is 29 plus 22 51? It is. That means n equals 22. Here's the other example. 12 plus b equals 55. Again, take what you know, that's 12 and 55, and do the opposite or inverse operation. So I'm going to take my larger number 55, and instead of adding, I am going to subtract 12. 5 minus 2 is 3, 5 minus 1 is 4, and the equation's variable is equal to 43, because 12 plus 43 would get me 55. If a variable is in the first position in a subtraction problem, then we again do the inverse. This is the only time it may get a little tricky, because here we see that, hey, you would just normally do what you typically do. The first part of this subtraction problem is the variable, z minus 8. The first part of this subtraction problem is the variable, t minus 9. If it is the first part of this open sentence, then once again you take what you know and you do the opposite operation. So I'm going to take 17 and I'm going to add 8. 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, which means z equals 25. And you could test it out. In fact, I always suggest testing it out. 25 minus 8 would get me 17. My answer is correct. Again, in a subtraction open number sentence, if the variable is first, you do what you typically do. Take the information you know and do the inverse operation, the opposite operation. So I'm going to take 14 and I'm going to add 9. 14 plus 9 is going to get me 23. If I try it out, 23 minus 9 should get me 14, which means t is equivalent to 23. The one thing I always suggest is trying it out. Once you believe you've solved for the variable, place it into the equation and try and solve it, and if you get the same answer, then you know you're correct. If you get an incorrect response, then you should try the opposite, which is what you're going to see in our next example. If the variable is in the second position in a subtraction problem, then you're just going to subtract. Here's what I mean. Many students just get so used to taking the information they know, doing the opposite operation. Now, because the k is second, that's not what you do here. But you can easily find your mistake if you happen to do that. If you did 18 plus 5, because that's what you typically do, then you'd get an answer 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and then plug it back in. Can you do 18 minus 23? You cannot. So if you forgot the rule that tells you because this variable is second in the subtraction problem, meaning you need to subtract, then just try out your answer and see if it works. In this case, when I do 18 minus 5, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, that will get me the correct response because 18 minus 13 is going to give me my actual answer of 5. The same thing can be said for this example, 41 minus f. Once again, the variable is the second portion of my subtraction equation. So instead of doing the inverse operation with 41 and 23, I'm just going to take 41 and I will subtract 23. I'm going to have to borrow here to figure out my response. 18 should work. You can try it out. Pull up your calculator, plug in 18 for your variable. 41 minus 18 should get me 23. If it does, you've done it correctly. If not, then just go back and do the opposite. What about multiplication and division? Well, the standard rule for both multiplication and division is that you will be dividing. If an open sentence says to multiply, you're going to do the inverse operation. Let's take a look at examples for that first. 18 equals 2 times x. It doesn't matter if it's x times 2 or 2 times x because of the commutative property. So in this case, I'm going to divide. I take the pieces of information that I know, and I do the opposite operation. And anytime I'm multiplying or dividing, I'm always going to divide. That's the rule of thumb. 18 divided by 2 is 9, so x is 9. And you can test it out. Same thing here, 4 times w, 24. You've got to take 24. And because it's multiplication or division, I'm going to divide. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24 gets me 6. Because 6 times 4 is 24. And 4 times 6 is 24. What about division? As I had mentioned, for multiplication and division, you divide every time to get the answer. So if an open sentence says to divide, then you divide. So in this case, you take the information you know again, 7 and 21, and you actually divide. So I'm going to take 21, divide it by 7, and I'll find out that x equals 3. Same thing with 18 and 9. 9 goes into 18 2 times, and it makes sense because when I plug in 2 to w, I'm going to get the correct equation. That is how you use variables to solve for open sentences. It's why we initially went over number sentences, and now you can use these strategies to help you solve the problems that you see using your algebraic mind. Thanks for stopping by.